Hi, welcome. It's Jackie from Cambridge Safety. Welcome to one of our short Take 5 Minutes for Health and Safety. In this short video, we're going to be having a look at the provision and use of work equipment regulations. Originally 1992, now 1998. So work equipment, what is work equipment? It's any machinery, appliance, apparatus, tool or installation for use at work, whether exclusive or not. So it literally ranges from that screwdriver or hammer, but it could include any automated equipment you've got, conveyor systems, robots, these types of things. So because it does cover such a wide variety of equipment, not all of the requirements apply to every single piece of equipment. There is no need to have an emergency stop on a hammer. How your emergency stop is perhaps you stopping. So it is the provision and use of work equipment. So by use, we mean day-to-day use, but it also means setting it, transporting it, repairing it, modifying it, maintaining it, and cleaning it to make sure it can be used safely. So there's a lot in there in this particular set of regulations. So you may apply it slightly differently to the different types of equipment that you've got. We need to make sure, firstly, that any equipment we've got, whether it's a trolley, a drill, a hammer, a conveyor, a forklift truck, it's suitable for the equipment, it's suitable for the environment and the use that you're going to put it to. Then we need to make sure it's going to be maintained correctly. We'll have a little bit more of a look at that one in a minute. Equally, some equipment we need to inspect regularly to ensure all the safety mechanisms are actually in place and working effectively. But even if you've got chairs in the office or in a training room, you may need to just inspect those once a year just to make sure that any screws and fittings are all in good condition and are tight. For some equipment, we might need to restrict use to named and trained people, things like abrasive wheels, power presses, chainsaws, these high-risk items of equipment. Everybody, though, needs to be given basic information and instruction how to use equipment, even including your basic photocopier. There is a right and wrong way of doing it. For more complex equipment, that information instruction may need to be developed into formal training. How do we know the equipment is suitable? Well, it needs to also have either the UK CA mark of conformity, or if it was bought previously, the CE mark. If we've got dangerous parts of machinery, which is basically anything that moves, and it may move in a circular manner or a sliding, reciprocating manner, we need to make sure that dangerous parts are adequately guarded. And that might be using our fixed guards, interlocks, automatic guards, trip devices, etc. PUWER, quite a lot in there. So we've also got an additional requirement to make sure we protect people against specific hazards, specifically overheating and ejected particles. We need to take steps to make sure that if the equipment reaches extremes of temperature, no one can actually touch those hot surfaces. We've got to make sure we've got adequate controls, i.e. buttons, levers, etc. for starting, stopping and changes in operation. They're clear, easy to use. Likewise, similar thing, but it's stop buttons and emergency stops. They're clear, they work effectively. So again, this is where some of your work equipment may not have any specified hazards. It may not get very hot. It may not actually have an on or an off or emergency control. So not all the requirements apply to every single piece of work equipment. If your work equipment, though, is connected to any energy sources, there needs to be a means of isolating the energy. Now, for a piece of equipment that's got a plug, that could be unplugging it. But some equipment will actually be wired or plumbed in to the energy source. So then there's got to be a means of isolation, i.e. separating the energy source from the equipment. All equipment, whatever it is, has got to be stable, and there's got to be adequate lighting in that environment for you to be able to use it safely. We've got to make sure our equipment is maintained, and we've got an additional requirement to make sure that the maintenance operations in themselves can also be carried out safely. This may involve a permit to work. And where there are risks and hazards that cannot be avoided, then you need to have your adequate markings, warnings, and labels. And bear in mind, the equipment when it was first installed may have adequate markings and warnings, but things happen, things get dirty, they get worn off. So it's making sure on an ongoing basis those markings and labels are still as clear as they were the day you installed the machine. So provision and use of work equipment regs says we've got to make sure all our equipment, complex and not complex, is maintained in a good condition. So for machinery, that may involve having a logbook, and if you've got a logbook, it's keeping that logbook open up to date so we can see what maintenance and repairs have actually been carried out. The frequency might depend on the frequency the equipment is used, its working limits, where it's being used. Is it outdoors in a wet environment? Is it indoors? Is it in an atmosphere where there's likely to be dust or corrosive chemicals? The type of operations that the equipment is actually being used for. Is it being used for one particular task all the time, or does it get used for different activities and tasks? What are the risks to health and safety of people if it malfunctions or fails? We may need to inspect, as I say, some equipment. So particularly where you've got equipment where there needs to be, it actually needs to be operating in a certain way. So we might need to inspect equipment after installation and when it's been put into service, but also if it's moved or repositioned. If equipment is likely to deteriorate, which could then result in a dangerous situation, then we need to make sure it's inspected at regular intervals. But also it might need to be inspected if we've had exceptional circumstances. It might have been involved in an accident. It might have got very wet. It might have overturned. So we need to decide what needs to be inspected and then put that inspection regime in place. If the provision and use of work equipment regulations are not adhered to, there is the high potential for injury. You can see an accident here and a prosecution in March 2022 where a piece of equipment where the dumper truck brakes failed. If you go to the HSE website, you'll see prosecutions every month under the provision and use of work equipment and sometimes the Health and Safety at Work Act, the overall responsibility to make sure that we provide safe plant and equipment. And PUWER really just takes that requirement and gives us more of the specifics. I mentioned the maintenance, so there's one thing about making sure the equipment is maintained in a good condition, but carrying out maintenance is a high risk activity. So we also have an additional requirement within the regulations to make sure that the work equipment can be maintained safely, and we've got systems in place that are not going to expose that person doing the maintenance to danger. Thanks very much for watching. That's a quick potted tour of the UK provision and use of work equipment regulations. This is Jackie Cambridge from Cambridge Safety, www.cambridgesafety.co.uk.